The aroma of stale coffee and desperation clung to William like the cheap cologne he wore. He sat in the sterile, sound-dampened office, and the only source of light was a single heavy lamp illuminating the worn mahogany desk between him and Jabali. The large amount of money William owed wasn't just a financial burden, but a physical weight pressing down on his chest and was suffocating the last vestiges of his dignity. It had been a debt born of infatuation and foolishness. The money, a colossal sum meant for a conservative, long-term family investment, had been funneled away during the blinding, reckless months he spent with Anica, his side chick. Anica had been all sharp edges with an expensive taste, a stark, exhilarating contrast to the gentle, pragmatic stability of his marriage to Vivienne. When Vivienne inevitably found out, the subsequent separation was swift, brutal, and had left him isolated in a different city, alone with his guilt and his debt. The money was gone, vanished into designer clothes, high-roller weekends, and a cryptocurrency scheme that imploded with spectacular finality. Jabali, however, was not concerned with William's broken heart or shattered finances. He was concerned with the ledger. "I'm not a monster, William," Jabali said, his voice low with a dangerous rumble that barely cleared the desk, yet felt like thunder in the small room. Jabali was an acquaintance to William, a man who dealt in high-stakes, off-the-books financing. When he had loaned the money, he believed William would be a solid risk. Now Jabali was staring at the empty column in his accounts, which made his patience evaporate. William swallowed hard while tracing the pattern of the wood grain. "Jabali, I've liquidated everything. The apartment, the shares. I can make a payment plan. I can work for you 24/7. Just give me time." Jabali leaned forward, his face illuminated by the harsh light. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, held a flicker of something terrifyingly human, paternal anguish. "Time is one commodity I no longer have, my friend. Doctors have been running a diagnosis on my daughter, Barbara." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "A transplant is not certain, not yet, but the preparations must be made. The match must be found." William's blood ran cold. He knew about Barbara's illness, a persistent and aggressive deterioration of her renal function, but he couldn't fathom where this was going. "I have researched your family records, William. Your health, your son, Trevor." Jabali pushed a document across the desk. It wasn't a payment plan, it was a medical compatibility report. "Trevor is a near-perfect match, a fantastic genetic offset from the maternal side, surprisingly." Jabali tapped the report with a thick, ominous finger. "The debt, William, is gone, vanished, irrelevant. I don't want your miserable payments. I want a future for my daughter." He fixed William with a stare that stripped him naked. "You are unable to repay the balance, yes? Then let Trevor settle the account. He will donate a kidney to Barbara." William recoiled as if struck. "No, you can't be serious. He's a kid. That's illegal. It's insane." "It is survival," Kajali corrected him, his voice hardening into steel. "I am not ready to lose my daughter, William. You are responsible for my financial loss, and now you will pay in a way that truly matters. If you refuse, choose to go to the authorities. If you so much whisper this conversation to anyone, you will lose your son, not just metaphorically, but entirely." The threat was delivered with such cold, absolute conviction that William knew it was not a bluff. It was a promise. He had signed away his financial life to this man, and now Jabali was demanding a piece of his son's body. William stumbled out of the office, the sterile air replaced by the choking smog of moral panic. He had to tell Vivienne. He had to stop this. But how? Jabali owned him, body and soul. The message reached Vivienne 3 days later, filtered through the guarded language William had used in a frantic and untraceable phone call. He was terrified and was stammering about a debt, a favor, about a medical procedure involving Trevor and Jabali's daughter. He couldn't bring himself to say the word kidney. Vivienne lived 3 states away, a carefully constructed distance meant to heal the wounds left by William and Anica's betrayal. She worked long hours as a hospital administrator, her life a rigid with predictable schedule built around protecting and cherishing her 13-year-old son, Trevor. He was a kind and lanky boy, obsessed with space and totally oblivious to the darkness closing in on his future. When she finally decoded William's terror, the kidney, the non-negotiable demand, and the lethal threat, her heart didn't just break. It shattered into a million pieces of white-hot rage. She sat on the edge of her bed with the phone still warm against her ear, the word no escaping her lips not as a plea, but as a guttural and absolute vow. A big no. She repeated it louder, channeling the primal fury of a mother defending her young. Jabali was not just demanding money, he was demanding a pound of her son's flesh, a piece of his healthy future, all to rectify a mistake William had made with his mistress. The injustice was unbearable. "You tell me exactly what he said, William," she commanded, her voice dangerously calm, the control necessary to prevent her from screaming. William recounted the office confrontation, the chilling certainty of Jabali's threat. If William refused, he would lose Trevor. "He means kidnapping Trevor, Vivienne. He's serious. They're watching me. They'll be watching you soon," William whispered. "Then we disappear," she stated simply. The logic of a hunted animal took over. Running was her only option. Fighting Jabali directly, a man she knew had deep shadowy connections from William's past dealings, was suicide. She had to become a ghost. Her life of careful rebuilding instantly became a liability. The stable job, the cozy apartment, the new friends were all threads Jabali could use to pull her back. Vivienne started plotting immediately. First, silence. She didn't just change her number, she bought a prepaid burner phone and instructed William to do the same, to communicate only at pre-agreed times using coded phrases about market fluctuations and inventory. Next, the liquid assets. She began selling everything valuable that wasn't bolted down, telling her neighbors she was taking a long-term sabbatical. She emptied her savings accounts and converted the cash into untraceable precious metals and foreign currency, stashing them in a backpack. But the hardest part was Trevor. How do you tell your child that he has to leave his school, his friends, his telescope, and his entire life because his father's mistake has placed a target on his back? She settled on a half-truth. A sudden, incredible opportunity had come up for her to work remotely, and they were going on a grand multi-city adventure. A sabbatical turned into an emergency escape plan. Trevor was thrilled by the idea of adventure, blissfully unaware that the stakes were life and death. As night fell, Vivienne looked at her sleeping son, the delicate curve of his jaw, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Jabali wanted to open that boy up and take something essential from him. "I will not let that happen," she swore, packing the last of their essentials. "I will burn the world down before I let that happen." William was now a man adrift, a pawn between 2 unstoppable forces, the terrifying retribution of Jabali and the desperate, cold fury of Vivienne. He had tried to contact Anica, the one who had cheered him on while the money evaporated, the one who had convinced him that the high-risk investment was guaranteed, that they deserved the luxury. He found her living in a smaller but still trendy part of the city. She was shocked to see him, her expensive makeup failing to conceal a flicker of annoyance. They met in a crowded, anonymous coffee shop. "William, you look terrible. What is this emergency?" she asked, stirring her latte, her attention already drifting back to her phone. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He detailed the situation, the debt, the diagnosis, Jabali's monstrous proposal involving Trevor. He laid the burden of his panic and guilt at her feet, hoping for a shred of compassion, or, at the very least, a plan. Anica listened, her face transforming slowly from annoyance to a brittle indifference. When he finished, the silence stretched, punctuated only by the clatter of ceramic cups. "And what exactly do you expect me to do, William?" she finally asked, her tone flat. "I didn't sign the loan papers. That was your mistake. You signed the contracts, not me. I thought we were having fun, enjoying what you had." "We spent it together. That was the money meant to cover this. My son's life is on the line because of this debt," he pleaded, lowering his voice when patrons turned their heads. Anica sighed, the gesture theatrical and dismissive. "He's your son, William, not mine. You chose to leave Vivienne for me. You chose to splurge, and you chose to borrow from a man like Jabali. These were all your choices. My advice to you is to figure out your mess. My life is finally calm, and I'm not going to ruin it for your melodrama." She stood up, adjusting her tailored blazer. "Don't call me again. You don't need a mistress. You need a financial advisor, and maybe a lawyer." Anica's cold indifference was a final devastating blow. It confirmed the full scope of his personal ruin. He had lost his wife, jeopardized his son, and lost the money, all for a fleeting, self-destructive affair with a woman who felt nothing. Meanwhile, Jabali's patience was running thin. He was tracking William, waiting for him to break, to lead them to Vivienne and Trevor. "The window is closing, William," Jabali's enforcer, a mountainous man named Burke, told him, cornering him outside his new, modest office. "Barbara's tests are confirming the need. We need the boy's blood sample for final cross-matching by the end of the week. Bring us the boy or bring us the woman. The choice is yours." William was forced to act, but not in the way Jabali intended. He used his burner phone, texting Vivienne with a prearranged code phrase. "Inventory is depleted. The inspection is scheduled for Friday." Vivienne understood. The deadline was Friday. She had to be out, completely invisible by then. She was on her own, fighting a battle that William had initiated and now could only watch from the sidelines, immobilized by fear and shame.
Vivienne's new life, the grand adventure, began with a train ride far to the west, away from the eastern seaboard and the city where William and Jabali resided. She had liquidated everything efficiently, leaving no forwarding address, no digital trail on her laptop or credit cards. The physical cash, converted into small, easily concealable denominations, was her lifeline. She was meticulous. She knew Jabali wouldn't use traditional tracking methods. He would rely on people, on eyes and ears, on the mundane routines that tie us to a place. Her first critical move was the phone dump. At a crowded transit hub, she destroyed her phone, tossing the pieces into multiple bins across a wide area. She then activated a new, clean burner phone, using it only for essential communication with William, a message every 48 hours to gauge the danger level, never more than 4 words, always using encrypted messaging apps. Trevor, bless his innocent heart, was initially excited. "Mom, this is like a spy movie. Are we going to see the Grand Canyon first, or are we heading straight for the Pacific?" The weight of her lie was crushing, but necessary. "We're taking it one city at a time, sweetie. It's a road trip to find inspiration." In the first anonymous city, they stayed in a cheap motel, paying cash only. Vivienne's paranoia was her constant companion. Every shadow was an enforcer, every strange car a surveillance team. Back east, William was being squeezed. Burke and his men had moved into William's small apartment building, making their presence known, turning his days into a waking nightmare. William's only value was his bait. They believed Vivienne would surface to save him, or at least communicate with him, thereby exposing her location. When William reported via the encrypted line that the inventory date was confirmed, Friday, Vivienne knew the stakes had escalated. Jabali was done waiting. She bought 2 bus tickets for a city 800 miles further west, using a pseudonym and cash, of course. As they were waiting for the busy depot, she noticed him, a large man with a vacant, watchful gaze, holding a crumpled newspaper, conspicuously still among the moving crowds. He wasn't looking at the departure board. He was scanning faces, scanning the parents.
Panic flared, but Vivienne forced herself to be calm. She pulled Trevor close. "Trevor, new game. We're late for the bus. Don't look up. Don't make eye contact with anyone. Just run with me, now." She didn't head for their gate. Instead, she grabbed their backpacks and bolted toward the nearest restroom facility. She pushed Trevor into an empty stall. "Stay here, Trevor. No matter what, you do not come out until I tell you." Then she executed a risky, desperate maneuver. She ran out of the facility and down the main corridor, acting the part of a distraught woman searching for a lost item. She caught the eye of the large man, the Watcher. He took the bait, recognizing the frantic profile in the backpack. He moved, lumbering after her. Vivienne ran into the crowd near the opposite platform, momentarily disappearing into the chaos. She doubled back through a service hallway, emerging 20 feet from the restroom, and burst back inside, finding Trevor huddled, shaking in the stall. "We have to go. They saw me," she whispered, grabbing his hand. They exited the bus station through a staff door she'd spotted, hailing a cab instantly, the backpack filled with their entire future clutched tight. As the cab pulled away, she saw the large man, standing near the entrance, scanning the crowd, having lost the scent. They had escaped, but the close call proved two things. Jabali's net was cast wide, and she couldn't rely on William's intel for safety. From this moment on, every move had to be perfectly calculated. They were now truly alone. Jabali sat in his private study, the medical charts for Barbara spread out like a map of a treacherous sea. Her condition was deteriorating faster than anticipated. The diagnosis was now definitive. The transplant was necessary, and soon. The time for waiting was over. His methods were brutal, but his motive, in his mind, was pure: a father saving his daughter. Jabali had worked hard to get out of the street-level criminal element, building a sophisticated, almost corporate criminal structure. His desperation was his weakness, yet also his greatest strength. He wouldn't lose Barbara to a shortage of funds, and certainly not to the reckless irresponsibility of a man like William. He stared at a small photograph of William, his eyes narrowed. William had become useless. He was a trembling, broken man who had served his purpose by confirming Vivienne's refusal and subsequent flight. He was no longer bait, he was a liability. "Burke," Jabali called into the intercom. "Stop tracking William. Let him go. He's done. We pivot." Burke, the enforcer, stood by the desk, his features impassive. "The woman is smart, boss. She cut all traces. Cash only, burner phones. The trail is cold." "Then we set a new fire," Jabali said, a slow, cold smile spreading across his lips. "Vivienne is a mother. Her weakness is not William, but her son, Trevor. If she cannot be found, then the people she cares about can be found." He reached for a dossier on Vivienne's parents, an elderly couple living a quiet life in a coastal retirement community. They were too frail to be targets for physical harm, but they were perfect leverage. "Send 2 teams, 1 to the parents. Watch, listen, wait. If they receive a call from Vivienne, the call is the only thing we care about. The second team, I want you to start a very specific rumor in William's circle. A rumor that William has agreed to the donation and that the preparation is underway. He needs to believe William has betrayed her." Jabali's strategy was psychological warfare. Vivienne, constantly on the move, would eventually need to check in on her family. When she did, she would discover 2 things. Her parents were under soft surveillance, and crucially, that her estranged husband, in a moment of cowardice and self-preservation, had apparently sold their son. The greatest weapon against a mother protecting her child is the illusion of betrayal, Jabali murmured. She will surface not to save her parents, but to confront William, convinced he has sacrificed Trevor to escape my wrath. That confrontation is what we need. He looked back at Barbara's charts. "I am doing this for you, my angel." The moral calculus was skewed by his love. He was willing to ruin William, terrorize Vivienne, and take an organ from an innocent boy, all because he was not ready to lose his daughter. The debt of money had morphed into the debt of the flesh, and the price was being paid by everyone except Jabali. He was merely the conductor of the symphony of fear.
3 weeks later, Vivienne and Trevor were holed up in a tiny, sparsely furnished apartment in the Pacific Northwest. The adventure had become a repetitive cycle of cheap meals and forced isolation. Trevor, though trying to be brave, was growing restless, missing his school and the familiar hum of home. Vivienne knew they couldn't sustain this. Her funds were finite, and the strain of constant vigilance was eroding her judgment. She had not called her parents, fearing Jabali's eavesdropping, but the silence was an ache. She logged onto a secure dark web forum, a relic from her administrator days, a place for whistleblowers and privacy experts, and posted a vague, encrypted query about Jabali. Within minutes she had confirmation. Jabali's name was toxic, linked to disappearances and forced settlements. She had been right to run. Then she got William's panicked message breaking their code. The message wasn't from William, but from a trusted associate of his, routed through a complex proxy chain. Jabali told our people you abandoned William, but the word on the street is that William agreed. The doctors have been alerted. They think he gave them Trevor's location. The news hit her with the force of a physical blow. William, the man who had already sacrificed their marriage for Anica's affection, had now, allegedly, sacrificed his own son to save his skin from Jabali. The betrayal was absolute, the lowest possible act of cowardice. Her carefully constructed calm dissolved. She saw Jabali's strategy clearly, using William's supposed compliance to draw her out. But what if it wasn't a lie? What if William had truly broken? She had to know. She had to save Trevor. Vivienne made the hardest decision of her life. She would initiate a final contact, a confrontation, but she wouldn't confront William. She would confront Jabali himself. Not in person, but over the phone, giving him one calculated opening to track her, but on her terms. She used the secure line, called a number she'd found on Jabali's company registration documents, and waited for the man himself to pick up. "This is Vivienne," she said when she heard his dangerous low voice. Jabali's tone was smooth, triumphant. "Vivienne, so you were waiting for the right moment. Smart. Your husband has seen the light. He is cooperating. Bring Trevor to the clinic in the city. The necessary procedures will be handled swiftly and discreetly." "Vid didn't agree," Vivienne said, her voice steady despite the seismic trembling in her chest. "He is a coward, but he wouldn't hand over his son. You are lying, Jabali. You used his reputation to flush me out. It matters little now. You are flushed." "Here is the deal," Vivienne said, ignoring him, her mind working furiously, mapping out her final gambit. "You think William owes you money, and you think a kidney is a fair exchange. I disagree, but I understand desperation. I am a mother too." She took a deep breath, looking at Trevor, who was now watching her with wide, fearful eyes, finally sensing the true nature of their journey. "I have money, Jabali, the money William was supposed to pay you and more. It is clean, laundered, and untraceable. I will pay you every penny of the debt, plus interest, plus a penalty for the threat. But you will call off your dogs now, and you will never mention my son, his kidney, or his name again." Jabali laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "My daughter needs an organ, Vivienne, not cash. You are too late." "No," Vivienne countered, cutting him off sharply. "You are wrong. Barbara needs the kidney, yes, but you only want Trevor because he is a match of convenience. If I can provide a better, faster solution, a non-relative match, sourced legally through a private broker with no questions asked, and the money, will you take it?" She was bluffing. She had no broker, but she had money and terrifying resolve. Jabali was silent. The possibility of receiving both the cash and a medically sourced guaranteed organ without the complications of kidnapping and forced surgery was momentarily compelling.
The total debt plus an immediate $5 million for the broker fee. You have 30 seconds to decide, Jabali. Say yes, and I wire the first fraction of the money to your holding account by dawn tomorrow. Or I go to the police with William and every single detail of your threat and Barbara's condition. I have a full recording of William's conversation with your enforcer, and then you lose your freedom and Barbara loses her last chance at life. Jabali's silence was heavy, broken only by a soft tick-tock. He was calculating the risk. Vivienne was holding a fragile double-edged sword. She had shown him that her resolve was as fierce as his own. "You have my account number. You know this sum," Jabali finally said, the anger suppressed but evident. "The wire must be cleared by 6 a.m. Eastern Time. If I wake up and the first $500,000 is not secured, I will use the coordinates your phone company is currently feeding me." The call ended. Vivienne stared at the wall, her hand shaking violently as she placed the phone down. She had done it. She had baited him, confronted him, and given him an offer he couldn't refuse. But she had also given away her location, and the dawn was only 6 hours away. She had to find a private medical broker, secure a massive amount of cash, and disappear again before sunrise. She looked at Trevor, who was fully awake now. "Mom, what are we doing?" Vivienne forced a fierce smile. "We're fighting, sweetheart. We're fighting for everything." She grabbed their backpacks and pulled Trevor toward the door. They had survived the night, but the sun was rising, and Jabali's men would soon be on the move, converging on the apartment. The debt was being repaid, but the transaction was far from over.
The digital clock on the bedside table read 11:58 p.m. In the Pacific Northwest, where Vivienne and Trevor were hiding, the 6 a.m. Eastern Time deadline gave them 6 hours. 6 hours to secure a non-existent organ broker, move a mountain of cash, and initiate a wire transfer that would keep Jabali's hounds off their scent for perhaps another 24 hours. "Mom, what was that?" Trevor whispered, his face pale. He understood only that the scary man on the phone wanted something bad, and that his father was somehow involved in the danger. "That was the end of the run, sweetie," Vivienne said, her voice not crisp and decisive, all fear burned away by adrenaline. "We are not running anymore. We are finishing this." She grabbed the encrypted laptop she had barely touched since their escape. Her previous life as a hospital administrator was now her greatest weapon. She had extensive contacts in global medical logistics, people who worked the gray areas of transplant coordination, often dealing with humanitarian emergencies and complex international funding. She logged back into the same secure forum where she found the initial information on Jabali. She didn't post, she messaged a user known only as Charon, a shadowy intermediary she knew only by reputation, famous for making impossible things happen for a steep price. The message was brutal in its conciseness. Urgent, high volume, clean cash transfer. Immediate, non-relative kidney guarantee for a juvenile. Need proof of concept within 5 hours. $5 million retainer on approval. The response came back almost immediately. A single rotating Bitcoin wallet address and a list of instructions. Charon was interested. Vivienne had spent weeks converting her savings and assets into gold coins and foreign currency notes, stuffing them into the false bottom of her travel backpack. Now she had to convert these tangible assets into the digital, untraceable currency demanded by the broker and, ultimately, Jabali. "Trevor, put on your shoes and coat. We're going for a midnight drive." She drove to a dimly lit, unmarked storefront in a forgotten industrial area. The sign read Global Currency Exchange, but the windows were tinted and barred. It was a known hub for high-risk 24-hour transfers, the kind that asked no questions if the fee was right. Inside, under the cold stare of fluorescent lights, a man behind a steel page examined her gold coins and stacks of euros with detached efficiency. The air was thick with desperation and the scent of ozone. "To a rotating BTC wallet, high priority," Vivienne instructed, her knuckles white as she gripped the counter. She pulled out the burner phone and initiated the complex series of transfers dictated by Charon. The conversion fees were astronomical, a final brutal hemorrhage of their remaining net worth. The conversion took a breathless 2 hours. Finally, the man handed her a receipt, not for currency, but for a blockchain transaction ID. The initial $500,000 for Jabali was now digital, floating in a holding account controlled by Charon, ready to be released to Jabali's account at 6 a.m. Eastern, only on Charon's instruction. As she drove away, abandoning the exchange hub, she knew Jabali's trackers would be converging on the motel apartment. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket and smashed it into the steering wheel, silencing the beacon she had used to lure Jabali into her trap. They drove to a nondescript all-night diner far from the city center. As the first pale gray light of pre-dawn began to touch the horizon, Vivienne sat across from her son, her own reflection staring back at her in the window glass, a woman forged in fire. At 3:05 a.m. local time, 6:05 a.m. Eastern, her new third burner phone, a simple flip phone used only for this one piece of communication, chimed with a message from Charon. Transfer confirmed. The tiger has eaten. He is still hungry. Move now. She had bought herself time, but the debt of the flesh was still being negotiated, and Jabali now knew exactly how far she was willing to go. The glow of the computer screen cast Jabali's face in an eerie blue light. His finger hovered over the confirmation notice. $500,000 successfully deposited into the shell account. It was a victory, but a bitter one. He had the money, yes, but he had lost the immediate control. Burke, his chief enforcer, stood by, reporting the failure. The apartment was cold, boss. They were gone minutes after the call. She used the phone for a calculated period to draw us in, then destroyed it and vanished again. Jabali leaned back, his rage ice cold. She is meticulous, and she is fighting with my playbook. I offered her the escape of running, and she offered me the escape of a legal solution. I hate being cornered by a woman whose husband wrecked my finances, but I respect the calculation. He looked again at Barbara's medical reports. The situation was dire. Forcing the boy was ethically and legally hazardous, even for him. Vivienne's offer, a clean organ, legally sourced through a black market that Sharon, whose reputation he knew and trusted, could facilitate, was genuinely better for Barbara's long-term survival and safer for Jabali's freedom. Plus, he would recoup the entirety of William's massive debt and then some. Burke, we honor the truce, for now. Tell the teams tracking the parents to pull back immediately. We wait for the second payment and the broker's guarantee. Jabali ran a hand over his tired face, but put a final kill switch on William. If Vivienne falters, if the second payment is late, or if she tries to use the recorded threat against me, William is the immediate collateral. Meanwhile, 3 states away, William was a ghost, left behind in the vacuum of Jabali's silence. He had heard the rumors, the ones Jabali had engineered, that he had cracked under pressure and agreed to the donation to save himself. He was ostracized by the small remaining remnants of his social circle. His guilt was no longer a weight, it was a physical disease. He had gambled his family's security for Anica, and now his son's safety was contingent on his estranged wife's courage and his own perceived betrayal. He finally received a cryptic message from Vivienne's third burner phone, routed through an impossible proxy. I paid the first installment. You are safe from Jabali's immediate fury, but not from your debt. Stay invisible. Do not contact me or Trevor. If you try to intervene, you will destroy this delicate truce. The message was a sword thrust to his heart. She had saved his life, but banished him. He was safe, yet utterly destroyed. He was alone with the knowledge that his wife was waging a war to save their son from a monster he had created, and the world believed he was the one who had sold the boy out. Driven by a desperate need to cleanse himself, to prove to the memory of his family that he was not the monster Jabali had made him, William began a different kind of plotting. He knew Jabali's financial network intimately. He knew the hidden shell companies and the vulnerable points where illicit money flowed.
He couldn't save Trevor with his body, and he couldn't face Vivienne, but he could use his remaining knowledge to dismantle Jabali's empire from the inside out, piece by devastating piece. It was a form of suicide, a final reckoning that would either save his family or lead to his own execution. But sitting still, waiting for Jabali to collect the rest of his due, was no longer an option. He sat down at his computer, not to run, but to fight the only way he knew how, by turning the weight of Jabali's massive illegal ledger against him. The truce was a lie, a temporary pause. The real war, the war for justice and William's soul, was just beginning.
Vivienne found a temporary safe haven in a 24-hour laundromat, the rhythmic, churning, mechanical sound of the heavy-duty washers providing a fragile sense of camouflage. She had Trevor asleep on a pile of warm towels in the corner, while she, using a laptop purchased earlier with cash, accessed the encrypted channel to Sharon. The broker was not a person, but a static, stylized logo, a black coin on a screen. The communication was via text, rapid-fire, and devoid of emotion. Sharon. 500K received. Confirm sincerity. Now logistics. Barbara's HLA type. Full panels. Now. Vivienne, drawing on her deep professional knowledge, sent a heavily encrypted file containing Barbara's complex human leukocyte antigen, HLA, profile, the genetic fingerprint required for matching tissue. She was speaking Sharon's language, skipping the amateur small talk. Vivienne. You have the profile. We need a confirmed AB match guarantee, legally sourced, ready for transport in 48 hours. I need proof of concept, the name of the clinic, the city, and the name of the assigned surgical liaison. Final payment of $4.5 million will be wired only upon this proof. The silence from the other side stretched, the delay more unnerving than any threat. Sharon was vetting the commitment, the risk, and the audacity of this desperate mother. Sharon. Your profile is unusual, Vivienne. An hospital administrator playing high-stakes games. Impressive. But 48 hours for a clean juvenile match is unrealistic. The timeline requires pre-existing commitment and a massive expedited fee. Vivienne. Then expedite it. The $4.5 million is non-negotiable. I will add an additional $500K as a liquidation bonus to you personally if the organ is in cold storage and ready to move within 72 hours. And I need a guarantee. Jabali never contacts us again. A final binding non-disclosure of all participants, including the original debt. Sharon responded with a single word. Done. A moment later, a document materialized on the screen. A complex, multi-layered contract outlining the terms, the massive financial penalties for breach, and a timeline for the final $5 million payment, 48 hours. Sharon also provided the preliminary details, a private clinic in a European city, the name of a contact, and the assurance that a match was being prepped. The total cost of Trevor's freedom, which she had won in a tense, silent staring match with a digital ghost, was the debt plus $5.5 million in brokerage fees and penalties. It was a crippling amount, but it was paid with money, not blood. Vivienne quickly secured the digital contract and confirmed the 48-hour transfer window. She had committed the final, devastating portion of her remaining resources. She quickly wiped the laptop, tucked it into her bag, and woke Trevor. We have a very long flight ahead of us, sweetie, she said, pulling him close. They had to move across the continent, closer to a major international hub where she could physically initiate the final massive wire transfer that Sharon, and more importantly, Jabali, could track, but only after the funds were secured. While Vivienne was arranging the rescue, William sat in his cramped, isolated apartment, bathed in the glow of his computer screen, executing his suicide mission. Jabali's operation was built on layers of obfuscation, and William had helped construct some of those layers. He was focusing on Jabali's most crucial and, ironically, weakest point, the shell company responsible for processing the legitimate high-volume transactions, a timber export business named Northern Pine Holdings. This company was designed to quickly launder large influxes of cash, like William's initial loan repayment, through phantom sales and manipulated inventory logs. William didn't try to steal the money. That would be messy and traceable. Instead, he used his intimate knowledge of the company's accounting software and jurisdictional vulnerabilities. His goal was to trigger a cascade failure. He spent 4 hours in a surgical, untraceable operation. He introduced 2 almost imperceptible anomalies into Northern Pine Holdings' financial records. One, a foreign tax discrepancy. He slightly adjusted the depreciation schedule on a set of assets declared in a small, fiercely protective Nordic country. The change was tiny, but it violated a specific, obscure international treaty clause related to dual taxation, a red flag for the regulators of that jurisdiction. 2, a valuation mismatch. He flagged an inventory shipment, a ghost load of timber, as having crossed a specific customs line 3 days before it was documented as being purchased. These were not immediately obvious to Jabali's local accountants. They were designed to be caught by a sophisticated, algorithmic regulatory audit, the kind of audit that, once triggered, locks down all associated bank accounts immediately and without warning. William leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had just digitally signed his own death warrant, but he had bought his family a fighting chance. When that Nordic country's tax authority found the discrepancy, which he calculated would happen in approximately 30 hours, Jabali's primary laundering machine would freeze, crippling his immediate liquidity. Jabali was settling down to sleep, content with the truce and the commitment of the $5 million, when a blinking red alert filled his private financial console. It wasn't the total freeze William had engineered, not yet. It was a preliminary warning, a sudden, inexplicable request for immediate re-verification of the tax documents for Northern Pine Holdings from the Nordic jurisdiction. It was a low-level tremor, but Jabali recognized the sign of deep instability. Someone was probing his structure. His first terrifying thought went to Vivienne. Had she set a trap? Was the broker an enforcement agency she was working with? But she needed the kidney for Barbara. Why risk that? Jabali's gaze snapped to the name he hadn't focused on in weeks. William. Only William knew the intricacies of that specific company's structure. Jabali's face contorted, the brief flicker of relief over the $500K instantly replaced by burning fury. William had not just betrayed him once with the money, but was now actively working to dismantle his entire operation. He immediately called Burke. The truce is over. William is active. He is a dead man. I want him located and secured now. Jabali's voice was lethal, cold as the Nordic Sea. And contact the surgical team. Tell them to prepare Barbara for a different kind of donor. The deal is still on with the woman, but if she misses the 48-hour window by 1 minute, we will still have the boy. Jabali, bring me William. Do not kill him. I want him to watch what happens to his son before he dies. The game had fundamentally changed. Vivienne was now negotiating against a vengeful Jabali who had discovered a second existential betrayal, and William was now the most hunted man on the planet, his only hope resting on the speed and success of his estranged wife's financial transaction. Vivienne has secured the broker, but only has 48 hours to secure $4.5 million more. William has detonated a financial bomb that will collapse Jabali's empire, but has triggered a manhunt. The next chapter will need to focus on Vivienne's frantic attempt to get the rest of the funds wired while dodging Jabali's renewed focus on finding William as collateral. Would you like to proceed with that final push?
The terminal at the major international airport was a blur of noise and hurried passengers. Vivienne left Trevor in the secure, prepaid lounge of a major airline, giving him detailed yet vague instructions about calling a specific emergency number if she didn't return in 2 hours. She had taught him how to blend, how to observe, and how to look unremarkable, lessons no 13-year-old should ever have to learn. She proceeded to the executive floor of a nearby international bank, the only place she could legally wire a sum as massive as $4.5 million in a single transaction without triggering a 24-hour hold. She dressed impeccably in an expensive professional suit she'd purchased only hours before, projecting the air of absolute financial authority. She needed to look like a client making a high-volume, legitimate transfer, not a desperate woman on the run. The transaction was agonizingly slow. The bank manager, a polite man named Mr. Hansen, insisted on tedious verification protocols.
Vivienne could feel the clock ticking down inside her chest. She had 90 minutes until the 48-hour deadline given by Sharon elapsed. If the money wasn't confirmed and the final escrow agreement signed, Sharon would walk away, taking the initial $500,000 and the guaranteed kidney with him. Jabali would be furious, the truce nullified, and the hunt for Trevor would resume with merciless efficiency. "I understand this is a significant sum, Mr. Hanson," Vivienne said, her voice smooth and confident, masking the fear that tasted like metal on her tongue. "But this is a time-sensitive investment acquisition. If these funds are not confirmed in Brussels in the next hour, I lose the property, and the bank loses my future business." She signed the papers, her hand steady. The funds were secured from a network of foreign accounts she had established over the last few weeks, a final, devastating drain on her life savings. As the screen flashed pending confirmation, Vivienne felt a momentary wave of exhaustion so profound she thought she might collapse right there on the polished marble floor. She had done her part. The money was wired, the clean kidney was secured, and Trevor was safe, provided Jabali honored the deal. The financial detonation. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away, William sat in the dimly lit back office of a defunct auto parts warehouse, the smell of oil and rust filling the air. He was hunched over a cheap burner laptop, watching the results of his own financial detonation. He saw the news feed, a small, obscure article about a government regulator in a Nordic country freezing the assets of Northern Pine Holdings due to unresolvable discrepancies in foreign taxation and asset valuation. His calculated risk had paid off. Jabali's primary high-volume shell company was non-operational, its funds locked down and subject to a forensic audit. A grim sense of satisfaction washed over him. He had done it. He had ruined Jabali's legitimate front, costing him far more than the initial debt, and ensuring that even if Jabali got Vivienne's $5 million, his empire was deeply wounded. He closed the laptop, knowing he had about 15 minutes before the digital fingerprints led the trackers to this area. He stood up, ready to disappear into the anonymity of the city's homeless, when the warehouse door shuddered open, illuminating the vast space with a sudden blinding light. Burke stood silhouetted in the doorway, flanked by two other large men. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. "Mr. William," Burke's voice echoed in the cavernous space, slow and chilling. "The boss sends his compliments on your accounting work. Very creative. But your creativity comes with a price." William didn't run. He had nowhere left to go, and he knew running would only make the situation worse for Trevor. He looked at Burke, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Vivienne paid the first installment. Don't touch my son. You have the money." Burke laughed, a low, humorless sound. "The money is one thing. The punishment is another. The boss wants to ensure the second transfer goes through without a hitch, and you, William, are the final piece of collateral." They moved quickly. Within seconds, William was pinned, a sharp, metallic tang pressed against his neck. The darkness swallowed him as Burke lifted the burner laptop from the desk, smiling with brutal finality. The confirmation and the condition. Back in the bank lobby, Vivienne's phone rang, the third burner, the secure one. She kept active only for Sharon. "Sharon, wire confirmed. 4.5 million secured in escrow. The organ is in transit to the surgical center. Deal finalized." A wave of dizzying relief hit Vivienne. She had done it. Trevor was safe. Before she could even call the airport lounge to tell Trevor the adventure was finally over, her phone rang again, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. It was Jabali. His voice was a razor blade on the line. "Congratulations, Vivienne. I am the kind of woman I respect. My daughter will live and my debt is repaid. The official ledger is settled." "Then we are done," Vivienne said, her voice shaking with controlled triumph. "Not quite," Jabali corrected her, his voice dropping to a horrifying intimacy. "You are done, but William is not. He decided to play the hero, attacking my primary asset this morning, a mistake I cannot forgive." Vivienne's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "He is with me. He is a little roughed up, but he is healthy. He is the price of his own stupid betrayal. This is my final condition for letting him go. I need a final private transfer of $1 million from your personal accounts, not to Sharon, not to my company, but to a private offshore account in cash equivalents, a fee for the inconvenience and the insult. Jabali's voice was utterly final. You have 1 hour to complete this wire. If the $1 million is not confirmed, or you call the police, or you contact Sharon to reverse the transfer, William loses his hands, then his feet, and then his life. His body will be found near a bank, reminding you that I always collect my debts. Choose. Do you save your child's health or his father's life? He hung up, leaving Vivienne standing in the sterile bank lobby, staring at the phone. She had saved Trevor from the knife, only to have William placed directly under the executioner's axe. The money, her last absolute reserve, or William's life. The debt was endless. Vivienne stood in the bank's executive washroom, watching her reflection. She had 1 hour. The choice was not about money. It was about the moral vacuum that had consumed her life since William's betrayal with Anica. Paying the $1 million meant forgiving a massive financial and emotional injury, only to preserve the man who inflicted it. Not paying meant becoming a widow, and sentencing Trevor to a lifetime of, what if my mom had just paid? She pulled out her fourth, final burner phone and contacted Mr. Hansen, the bank manager, under the pretense of an urgent final investment diversification. I need to make one more transfer immediately, Mr. Hansen, to a different beneficiary offshore. I need to use the highest priority, highest risk classification the bank allows. No delays, no questions, but I need a full compliance receipt detailing the risk flags. Mr. Hansen, scenting another immense fee, complied. Vivienne knew that William's hack had flagged Jabali's entire financial network as high risk under review. Any subsequent high-volume transfer into a linked personal account would be scrutinized by automated regulatory systems. Her strategy wasn't to stop the money, it was to use the money as a fatal lure. She initiated the $1 million transfer into the private account Jabali had given her, but she intentionally used a transfer code associated with politically exposed entities and explicitly marked the funds as being sourced from accounts connected to the now frozen Northern Pine Holdings assets. She paid the fee, a final, absolute sacrifice. The screen flashed, transfer complete, regulatory audit flagged, high priority. She had given Jabali his money, but she had wrapped it in a ticking time bomb of legal liability. She knew the moment he tried to touch that money, the final, devastating collapse would begin. She sent one final encrypted text message to Sharon. Payment processed. Check the source of the funds immediately. William was in a derelict basement, bound and gagged, the air thick with dampness and despair. Burke had left him alone, bruised and shivering with the cold certainty of his fate. The door creaked open, and Jabali stepped in, looking impeccably dressed, a man completely unmoved by the chaos he commanded. He carried a tablet, its screen illuminating his cruel smile. "Look at your wife, William," Jabali said, shoving the tablet toward him, displaying the $1 million confirmation notice. "Even after everything you've done, she pays your ransom. She saves the body of the man who ruined her life. She is a fascinating creature, your Vivienne." Jabali paced the floor. "The ledger is clear. My daughter will live, and I am richer. Your debt is zero. But the insult, William, the insult of you thinking you could play in my world and survive, that debt is paid in blood." Jabali nodded to Burke. Burke produced a long, heavy length of metal and approached William. "Wait!" Jabali commanded, staring at his tablet. A second, immediate notification had flashed on the screen. Alert! Account frozen. High-priority compliance violation detected. Source funds tied to extant financial crime investigation. Jabali froze, his victory dissolving instantly into horror. "What is this? Burke, check my other accounts." Burke checked his phone, his face draining of color. "Boss, the Northern Pine accounts are completely seized, and they just seized this one. The transfer, it was flagged, boss. It's all frozen." The silence that followed was broken by the distant, unmistakable wail of approaching sirens, not just one or two, but a symphony of law enforcement converging on their isolated location, triggered by the aggressive regulatory flags set by William and reinforced by Vivienne's final dirty $1 million transfer. Jabali realized the truth with stunning clarity. You both did this. The money was the trap. He roared, grabbing the nearest chair and throwing it across the room. Burke moved to secure William, but the moment of panic was all William needed. He'd been planning this second of chaos. With a sudden, desperate surge of strength, he pulled his hands, bound by cheap zip ties, against the sharp edge of the rusted desk. The plastic snapped, tearing his wrists, but freeing his hands. As Burke turned toward the basement door, alerted by the rapid approach of the sirens, William lunged. He didn't fight Burke. He sprinted past him toward the far wall where a stack of empty crates was piled high. "Don't let him leave! Get the boy!" Jabali screamed, frantic, realizing he had lost control of everything. But William wasn't leaving. He used the chaos to smash a heavy fire extinguisher into the pipes running along the wall, causing a sudden, deafening cascade of steam and water to erupt in a skewering, obscuring the far end of the basement in a blinding, hissing fog. Burke charged into the steam, but William was already gone, not through the main door, but through a small, rusted coal chute he had spotted earlier. He burst out into the alley just as police teams were breaching the main warehouse entrance. He kept low, ignoring the blood dripping from his wrists, and vanished into the maze of back streets. Jabali, trapped and furious, was apprehended minutes later, shouting in impotent rage about the betrayal, the money, and the final successful organ transfer that was currently happening in a secure surgical suite overseas. 2 days later, in a sunny, anonymous city far from the confrontation, Vivienne sat with Trevor in a park. She had seen the news, the massive arrests, the financial crimes, the seizure of a multinational laundering operation. Jabali's reign was over. Trevor, finally, was truly safe. Vivienne's phone, a brand-new, clean device, rang. It was an anonymous number. She answered with trepidation. "It's me. I'm okay." It was William. His voice was rough, scarred by the last few weeks. "Are you safe? Where are you?" she asked, the tension finally breaking in her voice. "I'm gone. Really gone this time. I gave the authorities everything I had on the rest of his network. I won't come back, Vivienne. I can't. You and Trevor deserve a clean start, a life without my debt." She was silent, watching Trevor happily chasing pigeons. "You saved us, William. Both times. You paid the final price." "No," William said softly. "You paid the final price. You sacrificed everything to right a wrong I made for nothing. The $1 million, was that the trap or the ransom?" Vivienne looked away, the sunlight suddenly too bright. "It was the ransom, William. I paid it because I couldn't let Trevor grow up knowing his father was murdered over a debt. It was the only way to save him from the psychological cost." She paused, then added, "But I paid it into a system that guaranteed your capture would be Jabali's last mistake. It was the ransom, but it was also the tripwire." A long silence settled on the line. William finally spoke. "I deserved this, but I'm glad you both have your future. Tell Trevor, tell him I'll always be looking up at the same sky." The call ended. William, now a true ghost, vanished completely, taking his shame and his redemption with him. Vivienne put the phone down, a profound sense of closure settling over her. The debt of the flesh was settled. The money was gone, but her son was whole, and the monster was caged. She stood up and walked toward Trevor, ready to begin their new life, finally free from the shadow of William's ledger. The greatest debt she repaid was not to Jabali, but to her own conscience.